Every morning unfolded identically. Alarm buzzing, silent kitchen, solitary breakfast, and a husband across the table who no longer lifted his eyes from his screen. Her husband, Michael, was a decent man by every measure, responsible, dependable, predictable. But across the years, the passion between them had transformed into something cordial and hushed, like a photograph left too long exposed to sunlight. She was not angry, just exhausted. Exhausted from being the one who noticed details that no one noticed about her. The way she still wore the fragrance he once said he adored. The way she kept his favorite mug on the same counter spot, hoping he would recognize that small gesture of affection. But Michael's world had contracted into conference calls, spreadsheets, and fatigue. And Rebecca's had grown smaller too, until one Wednesday morning altered everything. The office carried the scent of stale coffee and toner, the sort of day that pulls you through monotony. Rebecca worked at a modest advertising agency downtown where fluorescent lights hummed louder than human voices. She had just completed reviewing a client proposal when a new voice interrupted the office murmur. "Hello, I'm Adrian. I believe this is my workspace." She glanced up, and something in his tone, warm and genuine, pulled her from her haze. Adrian was new, probably early 30s, with a quiet confidence that did not overreach. He smiled the way people do when sincerity lives behind it. Rebecca nodded, managing a brief welcome, and returned to her monitor. But somehow she could not concentrate. Over the following days, Adrian's presence slipped into her routine like sunlight discovering a window that had remained closed for years. He was not loud or flirtatious. He simply noticed things, like how she added extra cream to her coffee on difficult days, how she hummed softly when focused, or how she always remained a few minutes after hours to organize her desk even when no one else cared. One afternoon, when everyone else had departed for lunch, Adrian stopped by her desk. "You're not eating?" he asked. "I am fine," she said quickly. He tilted his head. "You do not look fine." The words were not intrusive. They were gentle, and in that gentleness, something in her cracked. She wanted to say she was fine because that is what people expect. But suddenly, fine felt like a lie too heavy to carry. She laughed instead. The kind that conceals truth behind sound. "You have been here a week and already reading people." "Not really," he said. "Just paying attention." That phrase lingered in her mind for hours. Paying attention. When was the last time someone had done that for her? Later that week, the office gathered for a strategy meeting, and Rebecca found herself seated beside Adrian. He leaned over to whisper a comment about the manager's endless presentation slides. She almost burst out laughing, something she had not done freely in months. Their eyes met, and she felt warmth spread through her like a forgotten melody suddenly remembered, but she brushed it away. She was married. He was new. This was not supposed to mean anything. Still, when she returned home that evening, the silence in her house felt louder than ever. Michael was on his laptop again, the television humming in the background. "Long day?" he asked without looking up. "Yes," she replied softly, hoping for a moment of connection. "Same here," he muttered. Then nothing. She sat across from him, tracing the rim of her teacup, wishing he would notice that she was not drinking it, that she was waiting for a question, a glance, anything. But he did not, and that is when the guilt started to creep in. Not for feeling drawn to Adrian, but for realizing how easily she could be. The next morning, Rebecca told herself to act normal, to focus on work, on her responsibilities, on anything but that strange comfort she felt around Adrian. Yet fate, as always, had other plans. During a late afternoon deadline rush, the office experienced a power outage for nearly an hour. Most people took it as an excuse to chat or scroll through their phones, but Rebecca stayed at her desk, sketching something absent-mindedly on her notepad. She did not notice Adrian approaching until his voice cut through the dim light. "Is that a hummingbird?" he asked, leaning slightly. She blinked, realizing she had drawn a small bird hovering near flowers. "I used to sketch," she said, almost embarrassed. "Just never have time now," he smiled. "You should." "You have talent," she shrugged. "That was another lifetime ago." "Perhaps it is still waiting," he said quietly. Something in his tone was not casual. It was deliberate, like he had sensed the part of her that still longed for color and vitality. And for the rest of that evening, those words replayed in her head. "Perhaps it is still waiting." Over the next few weeks, Rebecca found herself laughing more, conversing more, existing more. Adrian did not replace anything in her life. He simply reminded her that she still existed, that her voice could still fill a room, that her eyes could still brighten when someone truly listened. She told herself it was just friendship, just kindness. But when Adrian stopped by her desk one morning holding her favorite vanilla latte, the exact brand she preferred, something shifted. "I remembered you mentioned it last week," he said casually. Her heart fluttered just slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled. "You deserve small things done right." It was a simple sentence, but to Rebecca, it felt like a doorway opening. For years, she had convinced herself that wanting attention was selfish, that fulfillment should come from within. Yet here was someone proving that being noticed was not weakness. It was human. That evening, she sat in her car long after arriving home. She stared at the porch light flickering, at the window where Michael's silhouette moved past the curtains. For a long time, she could not move because for the first time in her marriage, she did not want to walk inside. Days later, Adrian mentioned he would be working late. Rebecca, too, had deadlines to finish. The office was nearly empty when she noticed him struggling with a jammed copier. She laughed softly. "Technology is your enemy tonight." He turned, mock frustration on his face. "Only if you do not help me." They both reached for the same paper tray and froze, his hand close enough to feel the warmth of her skin. Neither spoke. The silence between them was not awkward. It was charged with something they could not name. She pulled her hand back first, attempting to steady her voice. "You should get home." He looked at her, eyes unreadable. "You too." For a moment, she wanted to tell him everything, that she was lonely, that she missed being someone's first thought, that she had not sketched or dreamed in years, but she did not. She just smiled and walked away. That night, she sat by the window of her dark living room, tea in hand, staring at the empty street outside. Somewhere in the quiet, her phone vibrated. A new message. It was from Adrian. "Thanks for helping with the copier. I owe you one." She smiled, typing back before she could stop herself. "I will remember that." Seconds later, his reply came. "Good. Some people deserve to be remembered." Her breath caught. And for a moment, Rebecca felt the world tilt, like something small but irreversible had just begun. She placed the phone down, staring at the faint reflection of her face in the window. The woman looking back was not invisible anymore. She was waking up, but as her phone vibrated again, her heart skipped. It was not Adrian this time. It was Michael. A message she had not seen in months. Just 2 words that felt heavier than they should. "We need to talk." And with that, the fragile warmth she had been holding onto cracked, leaving her staring into the dark, wondering what he had discovered or what he was about to say next. Rebecca stared at her phone screen. The words "we need to talk" burning into her consciousness. Michael had not sent a message like that in months. Not even when she came home late from work. Not even when he sensed something was changing between them. And now, out of nowhere, it felt like the ground beneath her was shifting. She typed back, "About what?" But hesitated before sending. What if he already knew something? What if Adrian's name had somehow emerged in conversation? Or worse, what if Michael had noticed the quiet joy returning to her face and assumed the reason? For a long minute, she just sat there staring at the blinking cursor. Then she locked her phone and whispered to herself, "You have done nothing wrong." But deep down, she was not certain. The next morning felt heavier than usual. Rebecca got ready in silence, attempting not to read into Michael's mood. He was distant but not cold, just quiet. Over breakfast, he finally said, "I have been thinking." "We have been distant lately." She froze mid-sip. "Yes," she managed. "I have noticed." "I want to fix that," he said softly, still not meeting her eyes. "Perhaps dinner tonight, just us?" It should have made her happy. It should have been a relief. But something about the timing felt strange, like he was reaching out not because he wanted to, but because he feared losing something. And though Rebecca agreed, her heart felt divided. That afternoon at work, Adrian noticed immediately. "You look like you did not sleep," he said. "Rough morning," she replied with a weak smile. He hesitated. "Do you want to talk about it?" "No," she said quickly, then sighed. "Maybe later." He did not push. That was the thing about Adrian. He never demanded, never pressed. He simply created a space where she could breathe, where she could exist without judgment. During lunch, while everyone else went out, Rebecca stayed behind again, lost in thought. She kept replaying Michael's words. I want to fix that. But fix what? He had not asked what she felt. He had not noticed why she was fading. He just wanted to return things to normal, whatever that meant. Adrian returned from a coffee run, setting a cup beside her. Double vanilla, extra foam, he said with a small grin. She blinked. You remembered? Of course, he replied. You look like you needed it. She wanted to say thank you, but the words caught in her throat. Gratitude did not cover what she felt. It was not love, not yet, but it was care, genuine and quiet, the kind that felt dangerous because it reached where her guard had long been built. That evening, she met Michael for dinner. The restaurant was nice, one they used to visit years ago when life felt full of laughter. Now it felt staged, rehearsed. He talked about work, about finances, about a possible promotion on the horizon. She listened politely, waiting for something more, something real. Halfway through the meal, he finally said, You seem different lately. Her stomach twisted. Different how? Just happier, I suppose. I thought perhaps you met someone new at work. Her breath caught. Why would you think that? He shrugged, attempting to sound casual. You just smile more now. It is nice, actually. That should have been a compliment, but somehow it felt like an accusation wearing a kind face. She set down her fork. I am trying to be better, that is all. He nodded slowly. Good, perhaps we can both try harder. The rest of the dinner blurred together. Two people pretending to reconnect, but talking like polite strangers. When they got home, he kissed her cheek goodnight. It was the first physical contact in weeks, and yet it felt hollow. That night, as she lay awake staring at the ceiling, one question echoed in her mind. Why does being cared for by one man feel like breathing and by another feel like drowning? The next few days passed in a strange rhythm. Michael was trying, flowers, small conversations, even offering to cook dinner. But every time he smiled, it felt forced. And every time Adrian smiled, it felt like light breaking through a storm. Rebecca knew it was not fair. Adrian was not supposed to be part of her emotional world. He was younger, freer, unburdened by the years she carried. Yet every conversation with him peeled away another layer she thought she had buried long ago. One Thursday afternoon, the tension finally broke. Adrian asked if she wanted to grab coffee after work, just as friends. She said yes before she could stop herself. They met at a small cafe near the river, the kind of place that smelled like cinnamon and new beginnings. They talked for hours about art, about dreams, about the ache of growing older and feeling unseen. When she told him she once dreamed of having her own design studio, he leaned forward and said, You still could. She laughed softly. It is too late. No, it is not, he said firmly. You are alive. That is all that matters. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. It was not romantic. It was not even about attraction. It was about being understood so deeply it almost hurt. Then her phone buzzed. It was Michael again. Where are you? Her pulse quickened. She stood abruptly, fumbling with her bag. I should go, Adrian frowned. Did I say something wrong? No, it is not that, she said quickly. I just cannot stay. She hurried out into the cold evening air, heart racing. She did not look back, but she knew he was still sitting there, watching her leave. When she reached home, Michael was waiting by the door. His expression was calm, but his eyes, those eyes that had once been soft, looked sharp now. Out late again, he said quietly. I told you I was with a coworker, she replied. Which one? Adrian? He studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I see, that was all. No yelling, no accusation. Just two words that landed like stones in her stomach. That night, Michael barely spoke. Rebecca wanted to explain that nothing had happened, that it was not like that. But something in her stopped. Perhaps because part of her did not know how to explain what had happened. How do you describe an emotional awakening that has not even fully arrived yet? Over the next few days, the silence between them thickened. Michael was not cruel, just distant again, like a man retreating behind invisible walls. Rebecca threw herself into work to escape the heaviness of home. And Adrian noticed the change. You okay? He asked one morning. I am fine, she lied. He did not believe her. You do not have to pretend around me. His kindness hit differently now. It was not soft. It was sharp, slicing through the guilt she carried. She wanted to tell him to stop caring, to stop looking at her that way. But every time she tried, her words fell apart. One evening, she stayed late again. The office was empty except for her and Adrian. The sound of rain against the windows filled the silence between them. She stood to leave, but he stopped her with one question. "Are you happy, Rebecca?" It was so simple, yet it broke her. "I do not know," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "Then perhaps that is your answer." She looked at him, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. "You should not say things like that." "Why not?" he asked softly. "Because they are true." She did not reply. She grabbed her coat, rushing toward the elevator. But before she stepped in, he said her name. "Just once, Rebecca." She turned. "If you ever need someone to talk to," he said quietly. "I am not going anywhere." The elevator doors closed, cutting off the space between them, but not the silence that followed her all the way home. That night, Rebecca could not sleep. She kept replaying his words, the tone, the warmth, the sincerity, and then, for the first time, she admitted it, not out loud, but to herself. She wanted that attention. Not the flirtation, not the thrill, but the feeling of being seen, of being known. The next morning, she woke early, made tea, and sat at the kitchen table, staring at Michael across from her. He smiled faintly, attempting to bridge the distance. She wanted to tell him everything, to confess her confusion and longing. But before she could speak, his phone rang, a work call. He mouthed, "Sorry," and answered. Just like that, the moment was gone. Rebecca exhaled softly, her gaze drifting to the window. Outside, the rain had started again, soft, endless, and strangely familiar. It reminded her of that evening at the cafe, of Adrian's quiet words, of everything she was trying so hard not to feel. And somewhere deep inside, a thought whispered so faintly she almost missed it. What if she did not want to stop anymore? Her phone buzzed again. A message from Adrian. "Meet me at the Riverside Park after work. I need to tell you something important." She stared at it for a long time, her heartbeat thundering in her chest. She should say no. She knew she should, but her fingers trembled as she typed back a single word. "Okay." And as the message sent, she realized that whatever happened next, nothing in her life would ever feel the same again. The hours crawled by. Every minute felt like an eternity. When 5 o'clock finally arrived, Rebecca found herself standing at the Riverside Park, watching the water flow steadily past. Adrian arrived a few minutes later, his expression serious but gentle. "Thank you for coming," he said. "What is this about?" she asked, her voice barely steady. He took a deep breath. "I am leaving. The company offered me a position across the country. I leave next week." Her heart dropped. "Next week?" He nodded. "I wanted to tell you in person. You deserve that much." She wanted to speak, but the words would not come. "Rebecca," he continued softly, "I need to be honest with you. These past months, knowing you, watching you rediscover yourself, it has meant everything to me. But I also know I cannot be the reason your life falls apart." "You are not," she started. "I am," he interrupted gently. "And that is why I have to go. You need space to figure out what you truly want. Not because of me, but for you." Tears stung her eyes. "What if I do not know what I want?" "Then you will figure it out," he said. "But you cannot do that with me here, complicating everything." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small sketchbook. "I bought this for you. I know you stopped drawing years ago, but maybe it is time to start again. Not for anyone else. Just for you." She took it with trembling hands, unable to speak. "Promise me something," he said. "Promise me you will not disappear again. Not for Michael. Not for anyone. Promise me you will choose the life that makes you feel alive." "I promise," she whispered. He smiled, that same warm smile that had first pulled her from her fog. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the evening crowd. Rebecca stood there for a long time, clutching the sketchbook, tears streaming down her face. But they were not just tears of sadness. They were tears of awakening. That night, she sat at her kitchen table and opened the sketchbook. The first page was blank, an empty canvas waiting for her story. She picked up a pencil and began to draw. Nothing elaborate, just simple lines. A river, a bridge. A woman standing alone, but not lonely. Michael came home late as usual. But this time, when he saw her drawing, he paused. "You are sketching again?" he said softly. "Yes," she replied. "I am." He sat down across from her, really looking at her for the first time in months. "I have not been present, have I?" She met his eyes. "No, you have not." He nodded slowly. "I am sorry. I got lost somewhere along the way. I forgot we were supposed to be partners, not just people sharing a house." "So did I," she admitted. For the first time in years, they talked. Really talked. About their loneliness, their failures, their fears. It was not comfortable, but it was honest. And honesty, Rebecca realized, was the foundation they had been missing. "I do not know if we can fix this," Michael said finally. "But I want to try, if you do." Rebecca looked at him, this man she had married, this stranger she had lived with, this person she barely knew anymore. "I want to try too," she said quietly. "But things have to change. Really change. They will," he promised. "I will." The weeks that followed were not easy. They started couples therapy. They had difficult conversations. They learned to communicate instead of coexist. And slowly, carefully, Rebecca began to rediscover not just herself, but them, the people they used to be, and the people they could still become. She never heard from Adrian again. But she thought of him often, with gratitude rather than longing. He had not been her salvation. He had been her mirror, showing her what she had forgotten about herself. 6 months later, Rebecca stood in a small gallery showcasing her artwork. The walls were filled with her sketches and paintings, rivers, bridges, figures finding their way. Michael stood beside her, holding her hand. Not out of obligation, but out of genuine pride. "You did this," he said softly. "You really did this," she smiled. "We did this, together." As the evening wound down, a young woman approached her. "Your work is beautiful," she said. "It feels like it is about finding yourself." Rebecca smiled. "It is. It took me a long time, but I finally did." That night, as she and Michael drove home through the quiet city streets, Rebecca felt something she had not felt in years. Peace. Not the kind that comes from having everything figured out, but the kind that comes from finally being honest with yourself, with your partner, with your life. She looked out the window at the passing lights and whispered a quiet thank you to the man who had helped her wake up, and to the man beside her who had chosen to wake up with her. Because sometimes the greatest love story is not about finding someone new. It is about rediscovering the person you almost lost, including yourself. And as the car turned toward home, Rebecca realized that invisibility had not been her curse. It had been her choice. And now, finally, she was choosing to be seen.